I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost was with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about Jackie Hill Perry and Preston Perry and what they said on their podcast about Charlie Kirk. I had mentioned it yesterday that I saw a clip that was going around, and then I'm like, I don't want to just go off of a clip. I want to know what all they said about it. So I just had some initial thoughts I talked about yesterday. Then I watched it last night. I did record myself doing a live reaction to it, but I didn't think, definitely I would assume would get flagged if I posted that whole long thing. Because by the time I got done with it, I was into 3 hours, and I was just like, I don't know if I want to edit this like that and get it down to a reasonable time. So I might still post clips with some thoughts from the long thing that I filmed last night, but I'm gonna play the core kind of part and explain what was it about, and I want to be as fair to them as possible, because these are my brothers and sisters in Christ. But I don't think they're totally fair to Charlie Kirk, and I think some of their feels got in the way. They didn't say anything too I don't know, out there, but just things that I'm like, I don't think they fairly understood him. So I want to talk about that. So we're going to talk about Christian nationalism and the culture war and left versus right and other things like that. And I'm sure by the time we finish that all, we will kind of be at our hour. So I guess I showed you guys a little too much. Peak show. There's a lot going on in the world. Very glad to hear about the peace deal, and heard Trump's going to go to Jerusalem. They plan to get all the hostages back on Monday. Even the mainstream media and even some different commentators on the left and politicians are admitting that Biden couldn't have done what Trump did as far as getting everybody on board in the Middle East to do this kind of pressure, which it's a different story with how much Israel continued fighting and fighting Hezbollah and the attack on the nuclear facilities in Iran. So this deal couldn't have happened last year, and it does take conviction to win a war. And so I don't know. I know so many people just wanted to end ceasefire. I would have been looking at them side-eyed if they didn't keep trying to achieve their objective and get their people home. I talked the other day about how it really disturbed me how people weren't considering the hostages, I thought, enough, or even when they're American hostages. We just got our last American hostage in May. There are Americans who were killed when October the 7th happened. And I always had this mentality of the United States would move heaven and earth to get their people home. So when I went to the Philippines in the 10th grade, and it was dangerous when I went, if something happened, that America would have my back. As a matter of fact, there was a civilian tracking us with a satellite phone to make sure we weren't kidnapped. It was dangerous. But I just, President Bush was the president at the time, and I just had it in my mindset that America won't leave people behind, and they will do what is best for American citizens. And it just didn't feel like a lot of so-called America First people had that mentality. I'm like, how come you're not caring or mentioning the American hostages? We should be helping them try to bring them home. And if that takes achieving victory, then that takes achieving victory. So I don't know. I thought the ethics of this war were pretty black and white. I guess we could debate it, but I don't know. It kind of seemed disturbing how many people just couldn't kind of wrap their minds around it. War is tough when you see devastation or civilian casualties or anything like that, but you have to have clear goals going in and moral reasons for why you're going in. And if you're willing to go in, you can't just, pop, 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 and it didn't solve anything. The aim has to be for peace, and hopefully it'll stick. I'm still like, I can't believe they're releasing that many like criminals and terrorists and stuff. Part of the deal to get their people home, and I hope Israel going forward does something about uh you know the people they detain who have tried to murder people, like consider the death penalty and other things like that. But um because really sending all these people in the wild, I'm like, I don't feel that that's terribly safe. But at the end of the day, they want their hostages home, and I'm glad they're coming home. And they've been through hell. They've been through hell. But anyway, before we jump into the meat of everything, I see you guys in the chat. Thank you guys for watching live, and to those of you who will watch back later, if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website, because it does cost a stream on my side, all that good stuff, so you guys can support. I very much appreciate it. I have a lengthy article that I've been working on about Candace Owens, and just detailing, because there's a lot of people who are just shocked about her behaviors, and I'm like, okay, here's some signs that some people might have missed, and I'm going to have a lot of receipts on it. And then I probably will do a long form video on it. Writing it down helps, kind of like having all those sources and stuff first, and then laying out my thoughts through video form. So I might not have time to finish posting it before I go to church tonight. But maybe by tomorrow or whatever, it'll be up. So there'll be new stuff posted, and there's other things that I'm going to be writing as well. So just be on the lookout for that. If you guys want to support, you guys can go to blacktnews.com/donate, because there's cost of stream, run my side, all that stuff. And I heard some people accusing me of getting $7,000 from Israel per post, which my sisters are like, if you're making that kind of money, like, you better send me some. That's not the case. So yeah, if you guys want to support me, I appreciate it, because I'm not getting $7,000 a post from Israel. And it's funny, because I mentioned I'm like, they're not paying enough for my Crunchyroll subscription, and people are like, you love anime? I'm like, I sure do. So maybe I'll have to talk about some of my favorite animes, which the favorite one is obviously Dragon Ball Z, obviously. But Solo Leveling is my current obsession, though. You guys can also check out merch on the site, different mugs and t-shirts and so on. You guys can also check out my books. I have Bigger is my 19th book, which is right here. You guys can go to there's a link in the description of watching a Facebook or YouTube that'll take you to a page where you can pre-order this. So I encourage you guys to do that. If you want a signed copy, or you want to maybe go to the book signing, it'll be a really cool day. So I encourage you to go ahead and do that. Also, if you're interested in the painting party with me, we're going to do a digital one, and I want to do one in person. There's also a link in the description about that too. So go ahead and fill that out if you're interested. It doesn't matter if you cannot paint, because my sister will teach you. She's very good. She's actually having like a one tomorrow that's like faith-based, and we're gonna be like, she does like scripture stuff with it, and like there's a meaning behind it and so on. So we're having that tomorrow, but so that's unrelated to black tea. But so she does these things often, and she's very good at them. So go ahead and sign up. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to getting with this video. Again, I wanted to just kind of go off the live thing that I did last night. But by the time I was done watching it, it was like 3 hours. At one point, I started watching it at like 2 times speed, because it was just kind of going so long. I hope I guess I just want to give a little warning. Sometimes when you watch things and you stream things, or at least this has happened before, that YouTube kind of like blocks it for copyright. I'm not sure how it will be with this. It's happened like maybe twice before. So if that happens, I'm going to try not to play a lot of this. If that happens, it will pause, and then it will go back to allow, like, you guys can see the stream after I've stopped playing the video. So if you see something kind of knocked out for a second on YouTube or whatever, I haven't, my equipment didn't malfunction or whatever. That's just something YouTube does sometimes. I don't know if it's going to happen. It hasn't happened in a long time, but it has happened before. So I don't know if they'll flag it or whatever. Fair use, guys. Fair use, YouTube. But I want to play enough of this so people kind of get an understanding what's going on. So anyway, Jackie Hill Perry, um, I guess I've never really sat down and like listened to a whole sermon of hers, but she's a very big preacher, female preacher who has a testimony where she used to be a lesbian, and she got saved and God dealt with her heart, and God gave her a desire for her husband, which I suppose is Preston. I didn't know anything about Preston until this podcast. I don't follow them on social media. I just see some of her clips go viral, and I'm like, oh, Jackie, yeah, that sounds real smart. And that's pretty much it. I don't follow them on social media. I don't know how they feel about different social issues or whatever. I haven't. This is the first time I like sat down and listened to a whole podcast. Oh gosh, hold on. It seems a little slow. Oh shoot, is that better? Okay, the speed seems like it's normal. Yeah, sorry about that. Don't know. I'm like plugged in, so it shouldn't be glitching like that. Hopefully, we don't run into another problem. Um, anyway, I this is the first time I've ever watched all their stuff. So there was a snippet of Jackie Hill Perry's talking about Charlie Kirk, and it made the rounds. I first saw it on TikTok, and then I saw Ali Beth Stuckey made an episode about it, and so I wanted to react yesterday to that snippet. Because she said, people are talking about Charlie Kirk, that he's a martyr. She's like, but I've seen other things that he said, and it doesn't give martyr. And my question was the same thing that Allie's question was like, okay, what do you think that you saw that it doesn't give martyr? So I started like trying to find that clip on the podcast so I play it and go find a little bit context before. And then her husband went to little bit of a story, and I'm like, what if they say more things and I don't know? I'm not aware of it. So I wanted to be fair to them and not just react off of one clip. Two commentators do that and don't go try to find full stuff. And I'll say that I've been guilty of that, but I just don't like when people totally take things out of context and they don't know what's going on. Like, I mean, I think there kind of maybe was enough context to have commented off of that. But my question of what does she think that Charlie Kirk has said, that answer might have been in the episode. So it's necessary for me to watch the whole thing because I need to know what she's saying, and I want to be fair to her. I want to be fair to her husband and this guest that they have on that I don't remember his name, but they did I do want to make it clear because I'm not going to play the whole podcast. They thought what happened to Charlie was horrific. And as someone who, is made in the image of God, it did make them sad. They didn't like the backlash that people were, happy about him being killed, that they didn't feel that was the right thing to do. This gentleman here, he also commented about people saying like, oh, they're trying to kill us. And I was like, okay, well, there are people who are literally out there trying to kill people on the right because Charlie is dead. And there's also and then there's been left-wing violence since then. It's like there's been a continuous stream of it. Also, all these people were celebrating and they said Charlie Kirk was hateful. I know that they would find my views more hateful than Charlie Kirk. So if people wanted him to die, it's not a stretch to say other people want us to die or would rejoice if we died. It doesn't mean they would all be willing to kill us. I mean, there's an attorney general right now who's, Jay Jones trying to run for the attorney general of Virginia and has not dropped out yet. I think one Democrat has called for him to drop out. And man, the person who's running for governor, she did not want to answer those questions. She got grilled on the debate stage about that stuff when she was up against Winsome Sears. It did not look good for her. If we have time, we can play those clips. I don't think we're going to have time. But It's unfortunately, I think, becoming kind of more common on the left. And people do distinguish like leftists from just normal kind of Democrats, you know, and progressives or whatever. They're in these different kinds of factions. But I think it's fair to say that there are some people out there who would be comfortable if we were dead. And I think people, I didn't realize how severe it was. Because it's one thing to like I don't know, say that to someone close and never write it down, or just maybe text that in some chat, but people like doing it on TikTok and just openly say it on X and Facebook as if there was nothing wrong with that and there wouldn't be any social repercussions for it. That is really, we're really in a darker place than I had anticipated. So I didn't like all this commentary, but something that was striking to me about this whole conversation with Jackie Hill Perry and them is that they talked a lot about Christian nationalism, and it gave me the impression that they think Charlie Kirk is a Christian nationalist. And Charlie Kirk wasn't a Christian nationalist. He would say, I am a Christian. He would say, I'm a nationalist, but I'm not a Christian nationalist. And he wasn't pushing for some kind of theocracy or anything like that, but he wasn't a Christian nationalist. There are different people who, first of all, when people started pushing the term Christian nationalist, and I was reading different articles about how people were defined as Christian nationalists, it really just seemed like if you were an evangelical and you were conservative and you were proud to be both and vocal about both, they basically put you in that category. And I'm like, okay, well, how they're defining it, I would be a Christian nationalist. But there are people who really do want to push Christendom at the forefront and then don't want anyone who's not a Christian in power, whether they be atheists, whether they be gay, whether they be Jewish. I don't know if Nick Fuentes, maybe he defines himself as a Christian nationalist, but he's someone who uses Christ as king to exclude Jews. That's why he and his people say that. They don't say it to glorify God. They're saying it to exclude, you know, people who aren't Christians and stuff. He criticized, you know, Jeremy Boring for having a Jewish man be the face of the Daily Wire. So there are like, I think maybe it's taking a more radical form, but I mentioned this yesterday. I think it's funny that people are always talking about how active like white evangelicals are in politics, but they don't talk about how involved the Black church is in politics. And it's also weird because he was like criticizing like people like kind of being so involved with politics, but he's like, we need to look into the civil rights movement and how they moved stuff with politics and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, the church was very involved. So is it a good thing or is it not a good thing for the church to be involved in you know, kingdom minded policies or whatever? So anyway, let's actually let's play a clip. But yeah, Charlie Kirk is not a Christian nationalist.
In Israel, everything they did was right. You know, in the Bible, everything they did.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's still at 2 times speed. Let me put that at normal.
Oh, this is perfect. You're right. No, this is not how it works. So you get this Christianity that really is ideological nationalism using Christian symbols and all that. And I think that's clearly problematic. Then the people that you've hurt over that history, you almost have to dismiss them.
Wow.
Because otherwise you got to admit again that you did something very wrong. And so you might get a small apology, but it's always let's move on.
Yeah.
It ain't, we can't sit in this because that would compromise our narrative.
Yeah.
Right.
I also thought like this kind of conversation and mindset was weird because when they were talking about Christian nationalism, like, well, then you marry like America is the chosen one. And I'm like, I'm like, is that kind of the deal that they and they're like, and if America is the chosen one, then you can't look at American history and really you know, talk about it because people don't want you to criticize their God and things like that. And I'm like, okay, well, he's definitely not talking about like most people on the right or people like Charlie Kirk. And I'm like, we talk about history all the time. We like American history. We acknowledge like things like slavery and Jim Crow, like those things were bad. And And it's so funny when people bring that up. I'm like, okay, the right isn't afraid to talk about those things because we're like the good guys in that story. Like the Republican Party is the good guys in the story. History. I write historical fiction fantasy novels. Like I like history. Like we didn't have to make up some kind of party switch myth because we're embarrassed about our history. No, like so we can look at that stuff and say that it's bad, but what we don't like is when, I don't know, the African American History Museum at the Smithsonian decides that it's going to label everything it doesn't like as whiteness, like, I don't know, believing in property rights and in the, you know, that there's only one God. Like like we don't like stuff like that, you know? When people try to look at history through only a hyper racialized lens. Like there's a great scene in Glory with Denzel Washington, and he's just gets told off by Morgan Freeman, and he's like, because basically, you know, he had like a chip on his shoulder about life, and you know, life was terrible. He was like a slave, you know, he had all these lashings on his back and other stuff like that, and they're all not getting paid like equal pay like they should be getting paid or whatever, you know. So there's all this stuff going on, like real historical injustice toward them. And Morgan Freeman's just like, you like, you're angry at the whole world. And he's like, white people are out here fighting to end this war too. And he's like, they're fighting for you. He's like, I know, because I had to dig their graves. So it's not just a white issue, black issue. Like there were evil people who did evil things on both sides. There are black people owned slaves. Of course, there are Africans who got the slaves, sold the slaves. You think the Europeans went over Africa catching folks? Like they got sold. So, but there was a lot of Christian white abolitionists who decided to end it and fight to end it. Not everybody fought to end slavery. You know, people wanted to keep the Union together, and so it's more complex than that. But when you have like critical race theory and all this other stuff that's just trying to look at some kind of hyper racialized lens through history, like that's what's crazy to me. What's crazy to me is these people say, "Yeah, I don't want to learn true history." Is that they're the ones who would get offended by every little thing. Like they blew like a gasket, had a hissy fit because Ron DeSantis had a curriculum and it said something about, you know, slaves, you know, took their skills that they learned from slavery and it, you know, and like did other stuff or whatever. Like, how dare you say that? It's like, but that's true. It's not, they're not saying that slavery was beneficial to them, but they learned trade skills that they then used to take care of themselves once they got out of slavery. It's just the truth. There's books about it. Like you can, from former slaves, like you can go read about it. It's just history. So, people can criticize history and acknowledge bad things, but I don't like when people try to appropriate the pain of their ancestors, things that they did not even go through, to act like they can't get ahead in the United States of America in 2025. That's what people don't like. We can talk about the past, but we just don't like people being focused on the past and always using it as an excuse to move forward. So look, we're not even at the main thing I want to talk about.
Yeah, I think if I'm just I know I've been talking a lot, but I think if I'm being all the way honest, you know, I didn't celebrate Charlie's death. I was sad because I think every human being should have been sad to see somebody die that way. But one of the things that grieved me was seeing so many believers who appreciated Charlie not being able to understand why we might not be as impacted over his death in the same way that you are.
Can I don't want to reword your language, but I also want to add to your language mid speech.
Okay, yeah. Help me, be my helper.
No, to say not only grieving in a way that's distinct, but also grieving, or they misunderstand, why don't you think he's a martyr? And it's like, because I heard what he said.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's not that I don't appreciate his stances on abortion, on sexuality, on marriage,
yes,
but it's also, I hear other things alongside that don't give martyr.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Thank you for clearing, because that's you actually said it way better than I wanted to say.
So he's gonna give an example or whatever. I don't like what she said. So that portion right there is what went viral, and I don't know, not like super viral, whatever, but started making its rounds on TikTok, and that's what Ali Stuckey was reacting to. As far as the, grieve in the way that other people grieved, I just want to put it out there that they did give context, that they had all these people like messaging them like, why haven't you said something, why haven't you said something, why haven't you said something? And Jackie didn't even know who Charlie Kirk was before he was killed. So I want to be fair to them and put it out there that there were people pressuring them to say stuff, and they were probably assuming and wanting them to say stuff along the lines that I have said and you've probably said. So they were pressured to say stuff. My thing was, if you don't want to grieve for him, you have to inauthentically grieve. That's silly. Like, if you don't feel it, you don't feel it. You just offer condolences, say that's messed up, like he's made in the image of God, like prayers for the family, like prayers for our nation, like we got to get into a better place, like, we should follow his example, continue talking even if you don't like what he said, just stuff like that could have been fine enough. Like, if you don't want to grieve him, you don't have to grieve him. But I also, and we do know that there are people who were celebrating, and that was very jarring. People certainly did not have to do that. But even people who would announce things like, oh, I don't care about him. If I don't care about something, I keep scrolling. I don't comment or whatever. If I'm a hater, like I mentioned this yesterday, I'm sorry I'm repeating some stuff, but I didn't mean to go on a rant yesterday, so I'm sorry. Like, I saw somebody mention like how they liked K-pop Demon Hunters more than the last Superman movie that came out. I didn't like the last Superman movie that came out. And so in the comments, I wanted to say like Superman was, I didn't say trash because TikTok is so sensitive. It probably would have got my thing flagged. So I just said, I think I said Superman was terrible. And I'm a hater of Superman, not the character, but of, the movie. So I wanted my feelings to be known. I kind of wanted to rate on other people's parade. I was just being a hater. So sometimes when people announce like, I don't care about him, you're not doing it because you don't care. There's like some kind of like little, ulterior motive or feeling behind that, because normal people would just say, they'd say nothing, or they would just, say, oh, that's messed up and leave it at that, So I don't think anyone should have been forced to grieve or whatever, but they are like public figures, and a lot of people on both sides of the aisle or whatever follow them and would expect them to say something. But sometimes people, it's just, I guess, the territory you're in when you're super, super famous. People do demand and expect you to speak on certain things. I'm I don't say everything on each platform. So sometimes people might think that I didn't say something here when I might have like said something live. Like, you guys hear me talk more than anybody else. But maybe I didn't make a TikTok about it. Maybe I didn't post about it on Facebook, So people might assume you didn't say anything. So again, I just wanted to add the context that they were really pressured to say something. And he has different feelings towards Charlie, and she didn't know anything about him. So no one should try to force you to grieve the way that you're grieving. But as to what she said about they like this, a bunch of social things and where he stood, but she's heard other things that he said, and it doesn't give Martyr. The reason why I said Charlie Kirk was a martyr, and I wrote an article about this at blacktnews.com, is that Charlie Kirk died because of those things that she said that she liked about him, those positions where he stood. He was killed because a gay man dating a trans woman, furry person, believed that Charlie Kirk was hateful. It wasn't because of his tax policy. It wasn't because of tariffs and all that stuff. People think that you are hateful if you do not support gay marriage, and if you do not support trans rights or whatever. And I don't mean like trans people should have the right to free speech and whatever. they believe that they should get access to puberty blockers, and they should be able to have these surgeries, and they should even be able to do it on minors and all this kind of different stuff. And if you don't want to use their pronouns, then you are driving them to hurt themselves. And they say all these crazy things. Oh, you're denying my existence, and your speech is violence, and all that kind of stuff. And we need to nip that in the bud. We entertained it for too long. We let it get too big. We let, and we've made our world like more insane than it ought to be. And Charlie Kirk, he was very firm in where he stood with these things, but he was very compassionate to people who believe differently than him. And he would say, I want you to live as God made you, and live out God's plan for you. But he did not come like he wasn't harsh to people. Like, even when he did his like debates and the crowd was lively, he was like, hey guys, let's be respectful. There are some times when he might have lost his temper sometimes, or kind of but we're not perfect. Only Jesus is perfect, and we have to continue in that sanctification and just really strive for perfection. But it's not easy to get there, guys. And I was having a conversation about someone the other day, and about how some of their tendencies haven't really changed over the years. I'm like, they've gotten better because of their relationship with Jesus. But I'm like, but there's a reason why you're supposed to crucify your flesh daily. You're supposed to like metaphorically kind of kill yourself every day in the flesh. And if you don't, crucify your flesh, then people got to deal with your flesh. People got to deal with you. There's a reason why we have to keep dying to self, and it's not easy. There's a reason crucifixion was not easy on Jesus, and we're just kind of doing it in a metaphorical sense. So I understand it's difficult, but he to me, I'm like, I don't know how many clips of Charlie they have seen, because I just didn't get the impression that they saw the side of him that many of us have seen. And I'm not saying that they were too harsh on him, but I think that they think he said quite a lot of racist things, is my impression watching this. And one of them said something like the last thing that they saw him say, or something, or last comment, not the Perrys, but the other person, that what he said was something racist. And then they said that they were like at one point like trying to be like real nice with the things that they were saying. And I'm like, they probably think that some of the things that he was saying was racist, not just insensitive, but racist. And I don't think that Charlie Kirk was racist. I would have loved to be on the couch and talked with him about this stuff. I would have talked a lot for sure. It's not too late to invite me on the couch, guys. But if Charlie Kirk, he wasn't killed for saying that Jesus is Lord, for believing that Jesus is God, that he died on the cross for the debt of our sins, for rising again. He wasn't killed for those things, but he was killed for living out his faith openly and letting it define his politics. Charlie Kirk said the most important thing is pointing people to Jesus Christ. And the second most important thing is making sure that we're able to do the first thing. That we have our free speech available, so we can go out there and live in the freedom of religion. There was a court case this summer of parents who their kids were being forced to opt into LGBT curriculum, and they wouldn't allow the parents to opt out because when you gave them an opt-out option, too many parents wanted to opt out of it. So instead of scrapping the curriculum, they're like, no, everyone has to do it. So they had to take that all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in the favor of the parents. But why should we have to do that? Why should Jack Phillips have to go all the way to the Supreme Court to say, I don't want to bake a cake for your wedding? Why should Hobby Lobby or Little Sisters of the Poor have to be harassed? And I guess it just is what it is, but we need to make sure that we are still vocal in our politics, so we still have the rights that we're entitled to in the United States of America. So Charlie Kirk was active, and he was involved in these things, sure, because it was really important that we're still able to do the very first important thing. So yeah, his life was about pointing people to Christ. And just because you don't like some of the things that some people say, and it'd be like, they were insensitive about that. So I don't think we should call him a martyr. He was assassinated for his beliefs that he espoused. Let's say 2020, I made a lot of people very upset because every time I saw that BLM hashtag come across my feed, I was lecturing people and I was telling people like, this is a bad organization. They teach Marxism. They don't have anything about making, space for Black fathers and uplifting Black fathers. They say they want to dismantle the nuclear family and cisgender privilege and all these kinds of different things. And they're like, well, I'm not supporting the group. I'm just, it's just a movement. I'm like, this is the name of their organization. People are donating to their stuff because you guys are using this hashtag and pointing to them. Like it's intertwined. Like, it's not good. All lives matter. Like, so I was really, really annoying a lot of people, I'm sure. And if something happened to me, let's say I went to Pakistan, my dad went in 2006, I think. Let's say we went to Pakistan or whatever, shortly after 2020. And I was killed for converting a Muslim openly to Christianity. And someone was like, she's not a martyr because, I didn't like what she said about BLM. She was a little too insensitive. Like, we were all going through something with George Floyd, and, she kept talking about BLM and she didn't like the organization. So no, I don't think of her as a martyr. So I just think what Jackie Hill Perry said was obviously wrong, in my opinion.
Because I don't want people to hear me saying that, I feel like he deserved it. I wasn't sad. Or I don't even want people to hear me saying like, I don't think that he was a brother, because it's not my place to put him in heaven or hell. Right. I don't think that he denied who Christ was. I think that he said so many good things.
It's true that it's not his place to put him in heaven and hell, but it seems like a weird thing to say. Like, if you had to, like, I don't know, put a bet on it or something, like, you wouldn't assume that he probably made it to heaven. Like, you don't know, Charlie, but it's kind of weird. Like, it's just kind of weird to me,
whether that was about same-sex marriage, whether that was abortion, whether that's, the deity of Christ and the triune God of Scripture. He said so many fundamental Christian things that I align with. But what I want people to understand is, like, I think sometimes Christian nationalism, not sometimes, most of the times, is so dangerous because it doesn't give people the ability to actually understand what we go through as Black people or what we have been through. And I'll give you an example. When Charlie, I remember.
Hold on. Once again, Charlie Kirk was not a Christian nationalist. He was not. So they talked about Christian nationalism a lot throughout this podcast. Charlie Kirk was not a Christian nationalist. So if they're going through this like, oh, well, Christian nationalism, it blocks people from understanding what we go through as Black people. Have you ever considered that maybe you're overly sensitive? Maybe that's a thing, and you're not able to critically analyze what's going on or properly understand Charlie Kirk's argument. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this because he's about to give his example.
Watching the conversation when Charlie made the comment about it's Juneteenth today, right? But Juneteenth is not a real holiday, so I'm going to work, right? That might be very, very small to you, but for me, I grew up with a grandmother who I've seen probably cry 7 to 8 times about how she hated the fact that her father came back from this country and still didn't have the right to vote.
Yeah.
And so when I celebrate Juneteenth, not me saying I hate the 4th of July. It's not even me saying that I hate my country, but it's me recognizing that my grandfather has a different history than your grandfather might have, right? And so I think sometimes when I hear him say that, it was dismissive to my experience. Yep. It was dismissive to my family's experience. And so when he died, I'm going to have a different emotional experience if you never heard anything that he directly said that was offensive to you. And so I think sometimes we just don't understand that. And I think sometimes what Christian nationalism does, it says, because we love America so much, we love the 4th of July. And so we hate anything that looks different or looks like it's competing with our day. But it's like, no, if 4th of July was given to us for us to remember the past. Mm-hmm. That's the reason why it was literally given to us. If my grandfather has a different past, for you to dismiss how I experienced my grandfather, it's hurtful. And so it's not even about hating him or not thinking that he's a Christian. It's saying, no, maybe Christian nationalism kind of entwined with his theology in such a way that gave him an inability to see all people the way God probably intended. And so that's what I wanted people to understand.
You hit on
that. I'm sorry. I know I'm not being sensitive enough to his trauma with his did he say his great grandfather? Because he said his grandmother. First, I'm like, how old? What does he mean? Came back, and then he still didn't have the right to vote. Like I know, like the Voting Rights Act secured like the right to vote, but Black men could vote after like 1870 with the ratification of the 15th Amendment. So I'm like, how old is this great grandfather? For something like 1870. So I'm not sure exactly what that's about, but here's my problem. Okay, so I guess if something happens to me, I go overseas. Let's say I go to Mexico and the cartel gets me because they don't like I'm preaching the gospel, or I go to some Muslim country, or I go to China and the secret police or whatever get me for preaching in the underground church. Maybe I'm not gonna be a martyr because I think Juneteenth is stupid. And not Juneteenth like in its essence is stupid. I think it's a dumb national holiday. I do. And I did celebrate Juneteenth. Like I worked for the Michigan Republican Party. Before it was a national holiday, we were having Juneteenth events. Because we thought like this is a Republican holiday because we freed the slaves. So we were having Juneteenth celebrations. I sang Lift Every Voice, the quote unquote Black national anthem at them. You know, they were great events for our Black Republicans and things like that. So it's a very specific, more niche holiday because you know, slaves were informed in Galveston, Texas, that, you know, the war was over and they couldn't keep these people as slaves. And then they celebrated in the streets. And that's how Juneteenth came to be about. Charlie Kirk noted that as far as having a day of celebration for the ending of slavery, Juneteenth doesn't make sense because there were other days that just worked way better than that. And there were still slaves after Juneteenth. So I don't like that when Juneteenth rolls around, people are like, oh, we're celebrating the end of slavery. Do people think that's the day that slavery ended now? Like, it's just breeding ignorance. So that's why I don't like it. That's why I'm annoyed by it. That's why I'm being blunt when I say it's a stupid holiday. You know, people doing it locally, people doing it, you know, the way the Michigan Republican Party did it, you know, maybe the GOP could have embraced it like, yeah, this is our holiday. It's everybody's holiday now, you know, but there were other days that would work better. So Charlie's theory was that, okay, they could have picked a different day that made more sense about the ending of slavery if they wanted to. But they picked Juneteenth so they could have something that competes with the 4th of July. And I have mentioned this many times. I might have mentioned this yesterday, but I watched people online, different activists and so on, try to sow division when it came to 4th of July, when it came to the national anthem and our flag, like different symbols that we uphold and love dearly that unify us as a nation, people were saying, looking at Frederick Douglass's "What to the Slave is the 4th of July" speech and saying like, oh, well, that's not our holiday. That's people were still enslaved, were slaves when they founded this country. So that's not our official day. That's not our liberty. Our Juneteenth, we got to celebrate Juneteenth. And that was the attitude of people that they're trying to push. And people were trying to not like the national anthem, Star Spangled Banner, because of a line in the second verse that we don't even sing. That's not even like pro-slavery. It just mentions like the word slave. And people wanted to get rid of that. People were coming for the flag and all kinds of different stuff. So Charlie did not want this sort of division, especially racial division. And it's amazing. So I concur with Charlie's conclusion. Now, it obviously didn't work because at the end of the day, people would just actually want 2 barbecues. So that plot failed, but I did see it playing out. So I concur with Charlie that there was an agenda there. So did he have to be extra harsh? I guess be like, it's not a real holiday, so I'm going to work. People sometimes catch an attitude when you don't celebrate Kwanzaa. Give it its proper due. When that's like not really a real kind of holiday situation either. But him being all like, oh, that really hurt me because he's not celebrating my grandfather. What does your story about your grandfather even have to do about Juneteenth? He's actually feeding into what Charlie thought about it, because he's saying, oh, that's we have a day for 4th of July to celebrate, and remember, and Juneteenth, that makes me think of like my grandfather not having the right to vote and all that stuff, and my grandmother crying. And okay, so you have a separate history, and that's why you want to celebrate that day, because you feel differently. It's instead of like celebrating your grandfather or great grandfather on Veterans Day, or just, I don't know, remembering and still honoring him on the 4th of July as someone who served the country. I think what he said came back. I think it was talking about war. I'm not positive. So I guess I'm assuming, but he's an American that is a citizen of this country, and all rights afforded to him, feeling like it's just so overly sensitive. It's so overly sensitive. And if you're holding that against Charlie and you're like, well, I can't, I wish people would understand that I can't grieve him the way that other people would grieve him because he said Juneteenth wasn't a real holiday. I'm sorry. You are too sensitive. You're too sensitive, man. How's Charlie Kirk supposed to know that you think about your grandfather for unrelated reasons to what the holiday even is? It's about the end of slavery. Like, unless we're talking about reaching into the 1800s, and I guess it could be that. It just seems like that would be too. Because my grandmother was born in my mom's mom 1920. So I don't know. That just seems like I guess maybe I need further explanation. I'm confused. Are you guys confused? Like I'm confused. But the point of Frederick Douglass's "What to the Slave is the 4th of July" speech was not to rag on the 4th of July. It was just to remind people that we still have a ways to go, and you cannot rest on your laurels, and we are obligated, especially as Christians, to fight for the dignity of the slave, for these people who are made in the image of God. And he said things like, we should have saw it as an assault to religious liberty when they enacted the Fugitive Slave Act. And it was just really about kicking their butts into gear. And he didn't believe that the Constitution was founded to support slavery. He believed that it was a glorious liberty document. As a matter of fact, one of the shirts that I have on my store is this quote from Frederick Douglass from that speech. Because people were trying to use the speech to tear down the 4th of July. He didn't even give the speech on the 4th of July because he didn't want to tear down the 4th of July. He gave it on the 5th of July. And after everything was all said and done, it's like, okay. But the point wasn't that we needed something separate or we were separate. It was that we were supposed to be brought together. And it's like, don't ignore people's pain because we're supposed to be unified. So this idea that like, oh, well, my grandfather has this, separate stories. That's why Juneteenth is important to me. That's why Charlie Kirk didn't like Juneteenth, because he wanted us to not feel like we have separate paths, but we are unified together, in this one nation under God. But even if you disagree with everything that I just said, everything that Charlie said, that doesn't make him racist, which he never said he was racist in here, but that's kind of the vibe I was getting. And sometimes you can critique him and be like, well, he didn't, his Christian nationalism prevented him from seeing our pain. And maybe you're glorifying your pain a little too much. Maybe that is an idol to you. If it's preventing you from acknowledging him as a martyr, or I don't know, toss up, did he make it in heaven? I can't say. Like, it really seems like you were just overly sensitive about stuff. So that was the main thing that he talked about. There was a conversation about Charlie Kirk's comments about the brain processing power and talking about, DEI and Ketanji Brown Jackson and stuff like that, which Charlie Kirk's point about bringing up affirmative action and the comments that Michelle Obama and Sheila Brown Jackson and Joy Reid and stuff were saying was that if he were to say that they only got into the schools that they got into because of affirmative action, people will call Charlie Kirk racist, and it's true. And as a matter of fact, Joy Reid, even though she loves affirmative action, she recalls a time when she was in school and there's all these white students talking about like, well, the black people are just here because of affirmative action. And she talked about how her credentials were questioned. And that had never happened to her before. So if you have this handicap of, affirmative action, like, it's great when you want the benefits, but there is a stigma that's attached to it. And Charlie Kirk talked about how these programs do attach a stigma, and he didn't like that. It invites unwholesome thinking is what he would say. So if he's commenting about like, hey, these people said that they'd only get it because of affirmative action. Now, they didn't say that they were stupid, but I'm not too terribly impressed with Ketanji Brown Jackson and her opinions. And why should I have respect for her as a black woman when she's too chicken or mentally deficient to define what a woman is? Why should I should be proud as a black woman that she's sitting on the bench when she's too cowardly to say what a woman is? And it's just ridiculous to be offended because someone called her a DEI hire when she's literally on the bench because she's a black woman. I'm not saying she doesn't have other credentials. But if she were a man, she wouldn't be there. If she were white, she wouldn't be there. Joe Biden he said he wanted the bench to look like the rest of the country. So that is why he wanted a black woman there. So her merit wouldn't have got her diddly squat. It was her race and it was her gender and the combination of that. Joe Biden didn't have to make it about race. He could have just picked her and got the kudos and the pat on the back. But he wanted to signal to people what he was going to do. It's called virtue signaling. Kamala Harris was the vice president of the United States because she's a woman of color. Joe Biden said he was going to pick a woman, and then the Democrat Party bullied him until picking a black woman. That is what happened. There were better picks. I don't like my governor, Gretchen Whitmer, but she was a much better pick than Kamala Harris. And as soon as they picked Kamala Harris for vice president, it was inevitable that she was going to be the nominee in 2024. And she fell flat on her face because she wasn't a good choice. That's why she dropped out of the 2020 primary before they got to the California primary where she lives. If she could win the governor spot in California, do you think she would have not done that? Some people are diversity, equity, inclusion hires. And I want to make it clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with diversity. And neither did Charlie. He thought it was great if it happened naturally. I don't think there's anything wrong with inclusion. Where's my Super Kid book? My Super Kid book, I wanted diversity on there. Like, I wanted it to be diverse. The Republican Party, people wanted to be diverse. They're happy, ecstatic when there's more minorities coming in, when there's more women involved and all that stuff. Like, they care about that stuff too. Black Voices for Trump. That's what they had on their t-shirts. That's what they had on their buses. That's what they called their offices that. I thought it was kind of cringe, but it is what it is. They like that stuff. It's equity that's the problem. Equity that caused Biden to say, okay, let's give benefits to non-white farmers. That's illegal. Equity that says we can't have laws that treat everyone the same. Equity is a problem, not equality. Equal opportunity would be like, everybody gets a chance. Like, if there was a job and we're going to consider all the applicants, we're going to pick the best ones. You know, it doesn't matter what race you are, what gender you are, what sex you are, everybody's going to get a chance, equal chance to apply for this. Equity would be like, we've got too many white men applying. They're not allowed. We got too many straight people. We really want a gay person for this position. That's DEI. That's the problem. It's really, really the E. It's really, really the E that's the problem. So we're about at our hour. Yeah, so they talked a lot about Christian nationalism, and this other gentleman who was with them, they asked him to talk about things on like the extremes on both sides, and like Christians, you know, who say they're progressive or whatever, like what's their issues. And he did say that the progressives don't want to accept reality. Like if it's their beliefs versus reality, they'll throw out reality. Like they'll say, you know, like with transgenderism, other stuff like that. So he's accurate on that. And then he said like Christians on the right, you know, they need to be like more consider like how they treat like immigrants. And he also said like healthcare and stuff. And I was like, I'm like, what do you mean how we treat immigrants? What does that mean? What does that mean? I would have liked to have been on that couch. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does it mean that when you break our laws, we give you a free trip home? Is that what that means? Is that what that means? I don't like all the meme stuff that Donald Trump does. I mean, I'm on the fence about it. Like, I don't like all the stuff how they run like the White House stuff. Sometimes it's funny. I'll be honest. Sometimes it's funny. Maybe it's wrong that I laugh, but sometimes it's funny. I don't like it all. I don't like it all. Sometimes I'm like, oh, bro, can you be a little bit more serious as the president of the United States, bro? But I do understand that there's a psychological aspect involved that may be very effective when it comes to humiliating criminals, especially very bad criminals. And perhaps it dissuades other people from doing bad things because they'll get caught and then be humiliated. So maybe there's maybe it's not all for clicks and glory. Maybe some of it is like supposed to be effective in that sort of way. But at the end of the day, just if we're talking about the policy of you came over and you broke our laws, which you should respect the laws of the land, right? They broke our laws And we have decided we don't throw them off of buildings. We don't put them in wood chippers. We don't make them drink like toxins or something like that. We put them on a plane and send them where they belong. So I don't know what that means. How the right treats immigrants. I don't know what that means. I think people who immigrate into this country legally are great. And they're some of the most patriotic people you can find because they appreciate that they're here and they give it their all. And those people are very annoyed with people who come over here and they act a fool. These people who are here on student visas and they go and they terrorize Jewish students on college campuses and stuff. And other people are like, we had to be on our best behavior to get our citizenship approved. We couldn't be on benefits and all this other stuff. They're looking at this stuff like it's crazy. And it is. So I don't know what he means. We got to treat immigrants better. Just because we want people to go home where they belong, our borders cannot be open. We need to know who's coming over here. You've already shown disrespect when you just come over here or you abuse our asylum programs. Yes, you should go home. Yes, you should go home. And as far as the healthcare, when you allow the government to do too much for you, government's, assistance, all this stuff, it comes with strings attached. That's why they could force hospitals and staff of hospitals and stuff to get the jab or lose their jobs because of the federal money that was involved with it. The more they do for you, the more control they have over your life. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have social safety nets or things like that, but we have to be careful. But people saying, hey, you please tax my neighbor more money so we can take their money and they can pay for my health care is not Christian. You deciding to be charitable yourself, you reaching into your pocket and caring for your neighbor is the Christian thing to do. There's a thing called MetaShare. I hear advertised on Christian radio on K-Love all the time. And if it's still a thing, I guess I haven't listened in a while and heard an ad for it. But where they would just be Christians like on a healthcare pool, and they would pay for other people's stuff. And when they get sick, people are paying for their stuff. So you can have your own little like Obama, care or help, you can voluntarily do like socialist kind of people pool their fun stuff in a capitalist society. You don't have to make the government enforce that kind of stuff. So if you want to pay for other people's benefits, get together with other believers and pay for other people's benefits, or you could bring them to the church, which is in believers who still believe that God heals. Amen. Thank you, Jesus. Like Peter, the disciples, I don't have any money, but I got something else for you. Hallelujah. Like, but if you, to be charitable, like Rand Paul, he's like, you can't make me do stuff. That's slavery. You can't make me you can't force my labor. I'm a doctor. That's wrong. But as a doctor who's a Christian, I believe in caring for the people before myself. That's what I'm supposed to do. So he would do like free like eye exams and eye like surgeries and stuff for people who were less fortunate. That's a Christian thing to do. So he also said something else too. I don't remember. I think there was a third thing, but when I heard that, I was like, really, bro? Really, bro? Not that I'm saying that there's not issues with the right. Like, I think sometimes Christians are so gullible. I guess this is both sides of the aisle, where someone can be into some really bad stuff and then they'll say that they're a Christian. And then it's like, okay, well, they're one of us. I mean, I guess people do it all the time. Like, someone will say that I'm a Republican. Like, there's one girl who said she was a Trump supporter and her parents like kicked her out or something, and that she was falling on hard times with her. But she scammed all these people because that wasn't true. And she just kind of preyed on the good nature of all these people or whatever. So sometimes people are too quick and they're too gullible or whatever to be tribal. There's things I could say about some stuff on the right, but those things that he mentioned, I'm like, I would have liked to been on that couch to add my 2 cents, because he was kind of balanced on a lot of stuff that he said, but it would have been nice to get because he seemed like he's a Democrat, but he's like kind of more moderate with his position, and I could be wrong. But I don't know, they could have got a Republican perspective on there. And somebody who I guess actually like really kind of cared for Charlie, or maybe someone who knew him. They could talk to someone about that. But the Juneteenth thing just floored me. Someone said J.H. Perry says a lot of stuff I disagree with. I don't listen to her that often. I maybe it's just like her best stuff that gets viral or whatever. But they also talked about George Floyd for a little bit. Because some people were saying things like, well, you were really vocal about George Floyd. How come you're not saying more about Charlie Kirk? And they're like, well, those things aren't really comparable. But then they're kind of like, well, why didn't you guys say more about George Floyd? And I thought, when I was watching it last night, I just went on a huge rant about that, because I'm like, the whole world like stopped because of George Floyd. We were in the middle of a pandemic, and they shut the pandemic down and said, okay, you guys can go out and march. That's fine. And so you couldn't go to work. You couldn't go to school. You couldn't do all these things, but then you could go out and protest and riot because George Floyd died, and BLM because Black Lives Matter. That was insane to me. George Floyd got this like big funeral, and the mayor was crying at his casket. And I had to go. I saw so many funerals where people had to be social distance and couldn't grieve with one another really and hug each other. Just really bizarre photos online. I went to a small funeral, someone in our church that I knew since I could basically remember, passed away from cancer. And we had to decide who could go, because my dad did the funeral and they wanted one of us to sing, and they decided that it should be me because I could probably get through the song and not cry. But most of our church members, and we don't have a big church, we have a small church, couldn't go to the funeral of this woman that we knew our whole lives because of the pandemic. And everybody just threw everything out of the window when it came to like the riots and BLM and George Floyd and all that stuff. There were so many double standards. It was crazy. And Trump did that executive order saying that churches are essential. And Hezekiah Walker's like, we're not going back to church until the White House is open for tours. And he sang at the George Floyd funeral. I'm pretty sure it was Hezekiah Walker. Let me double check. I know I did post about it. Every praise. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Hezekiah Walker. The whole world stopped because of George Floyd. There's a lot of people who really loved Charlie, and of course he had all kinds of elected officials and so many Christian artists and other stuff there at his memorial, and people were talking about, but him being he was assassinated for his political views. George Floyd, and I also talk about, I don't believe Derek Chauvin meant to kill him. So the circumstances are different that way. And he was like, and we saw all the stuff and he couldn't, he's on his neck and he couldn't breathe. I don't know if he was never on the neck, but there was another angle from the body cam footage that showed him like not on the neck. So I don't know how much of the trial he watched. And there's also like other factors. I'm not going to say he didn't die of asphyxiation. I mean, that was the word, that was the official death or whatever, but he did have issues with his heart. He did take drugs and stuff. And he was saying, I don't know if he watched the whole 8-minute body cam where he was already like kind of tweaking out and saying stuff like he couldn't breathe. And it was, every time they like touched him. And then even when they got him in the car, he asked to be put on the ground. And when I saw them put him on the ground, my heart just sank like watching it, because I knew what was going to happen to him at that point. And it was really difficult watching that like whether it was the viral clip or the whole 8-minute body cam, but even how Derek was on him, it was in their like police guide. So I thought he was going to get off, to be frank. So a lot of people feel like Derek Chauvin, what happened to George Floyd was tragic, but Derek Chauvin still didn't get justice. So I do think it's weird to compare them, but for people who turn around and say like, you guys talked about George Floyd, and if you don't care about George Floyd, then why should we care about Charlie Kirk? Those are totally different situations. And I definitely think that the world stopped for George Floyd and like was turned upside down. You had all those Democrats doing the knee pose and had the African cloth on their necks, just looking like dang fools. A lot of people stopped and everything, and people were talking about white privilege and anti-racism and posting a black square in their social media profile, #BLM, going to marches, making murals and statues, and doing creepy chants, say their name. So a lot of people cared and participated in all that stuff. And I when Candace Owens said, I don't care about George Floyd, I did a live saying, there's some things, that's information that she gave about his background that I'm glad that I know, but I don't like how she came off. So I wasn't out there like trying to rain on everybody's parade about that stuff, except for like the BLM stuff. I was totally on that, but it is a different situation. And I think what happened to Charlie Kirk was definitely way more tragic. He wasn't accidentally killed, he was assassinated. So anyway, I appreciate her testimony and their love of the gospel and trying to they had some nice moments, and they really did try to keep looking at scripture and the word. But again, I just really feel like because it made it seem like Charlie wasn't that, they wouldn't say he was evil or anything like that, but I just didn't get the vibe that they were aware of like all the kind and compassionate moments that Charlie had when he talked to people that he disagreed with, including like who were gay and other things like that. And his devotion to wanting to sit down and talk about the issues was so important, and to go through them logically. Now, he might say something that's wrong, and even though he's in error, it doesn't mean that he's coming. People act like Charlie is saying things to be racist. Like, even if they're like, he says wrong statistics. Let's say he did use a wrong statistic. Did he say that wrong statistic because he's trying to trick you all into believing that Black people are just evil and stupid or something like that? Or did he just maybe see the information and draw the wrong conclusion? Like, you're assuming malice in his heart when you could just try to correct him, right? So maybe he was wrong about that. I think he was wrong about stuff, certainly. I've critiqued Charlie Kirk plenty of times, and I'll go back and probably critique him more watching other things in the future. But it doesn't give Martyr. I just really didn't like that. I really didn't like that, and I'm glad that I watched the whole thing. Because I don't want you guys to think that they spent the whole time like really bashing him or anything like that. But again, Jackie Hill Perry didn't know anything about Charlie Kirk before, and her husband obviously has certain feelings because I think he's overly sensitive. I just do. And I don't know how many like clips that they've seen that were out of context. Oh gosh, before I let you, I got to talk about this. I almost let you go before this part. I almost let you go. Okay, so they were talking about how there are clips or whatever. People were talking about different stuff that he was saying, and they were talking about, well, some people say some stuff is out of context, and Jackie's like, okay, if you have to keep saying stuff is out of context, and there's a way with that's wrong with how you're phrasing different things. And I Like there's a problem there. And I thought that was so ridiculous because one, he did say some things that were controversial, obviously, that he had to go back and explain, or people had to go back and ask about, like the black pilots thing, for example. There's all kinds of ways that people could take that, but there's plenty of ways that he did explain it, whether he tweeted about it, he was asked about it, he went on Megyn Kelly's show to talk about it. You know, he shouldn't need like an extra comms director, maybe, for some of the stuff that he says. But there are people who have taken his clips, like the conversation he had with, I think, Naima on Jubilee, when they were talking about economic issues within the Black community, and they talked about Jim Crow time or whatever, and he's like, okay, well, economically they actually did better per capita, which she agreed with, and people took snippets of that and different sections to try to make it seem like Charlie Kirk believed that Black people, it was just better for them in that time, when they're specific, when the whole conversation was about, like, okay, if Black people were doing better even through this very difficult and racist time in our history, what is it about today culturally that's driving like low income for the Black community? And he would talk a lot about, you know, Black fathers, and they need to have fathers in the home, and all this different kind of stuff. And people take that conversation and they're like, oh, he's a racist, he's racist, he's racist, he's a racist. People took him talking to Cenk Uygur, and they're like, and just took him saying Cenk as if he was saying something else that sounds close to it. And they're like, he's saying a racial slur against Asian people. And that woman he talked to on Jubilee, she shared that. And so did Emmanuel Aiko and other folks. A blatant lie. People shared a clip of him talking about public executions, I guess, to be like, aha, he wanted public executions and he got one. He was talking about public executions of pedophiles. Why did they cut that out? Are they protecting pedophiles? Like, why do that? So it even mainstream media, you know, they took a quote of Charlie Kirk, and he actually like said something about like that was like anti-Semitic, but he was quoting someone's tweet and then went on to critique it. But they just quoted him saying the racist thing, the anti-Semitic thing, and then they had to issue a correction. That was either Washington Post or New York Times. It might have been New York Times. And then they platformed people like Hassan Piker to talk about Charlie Kirk, who actively talks about harming Republicans and violence and is a communist. Like, why are we looking through Charlie's life through the eyes of Hassan Piker? People wanted to slander this man to justify what happened to him. That's what this whole campaign about is with him. And back to the context thing, people take things out of the Bible, from the Bible, out of context all the time. And if you don't know the context, like where it's coming from, you don't know why it's being said, maybe who it's being said to. Like don't judge. How many times you hear that? And people act like there is no rest of the chapter. Like people take stuff out of context all the time. Like, oh, well, love your neighbor. That's the most important commandment, or the second most important commandment. Like, okay, well, what does the Bible teach about love? Like, we got to look at like a bigger sort of picture to understand the scripture and what the Lord is saying. Right? Like, maybe you could take some things at face value, but you have to know the context. And sometimes if it's something in the New Testament, are they referencing something in the Old Testament? Like, my God, why have you forsaken me? If you don't know that that's referencing back to the Old Testament, it's like a prophecy, like that describes like what's happening on the cross. You think, oh, like, well, God, Jesus thinks that God forsake him. If you don't know what's going on, so in what world is context not important when it comes to communication? If you can't strawman Charlie Kirk's arguments, if you don't know enough about his arguments to explain them charitably, I don't think you need to be talking about it. Is my opinion. That's what I started doing. When people bring up different stuff about Charlie Kirk, I'm like, can you steel man his argument? And most people can't. I recommend you guys start doing that. Can you steel man his argument? Can you really explain it charitably? And then we can talk about whether it was good or bad after I understand that you understand what he's actually meant. But what's really kind of frustrated me though, when she's like, context, because people have started saying that to me, because I'm like, okay, give me a citation of when you think he was racist. Like, no, because you're just going to say I'm taking it out of context. I'm like, oh, so we're just supposed to accept it, not actually like talk about it anymore. But I didn't want to take Jackie out of context. So that's why I watched that whole entire podcast. I wanted to be as charitable to her as possible, and to her husband, who I didn't even know was her husband at the time. I wanted to be charitable to their position. So I'm like, I'm not going to go off just this clip that people are talking about and people are saying. I'm going to go watch the whole entire thing because I want to be charitable to my brothers and sisters in Christ. So I miss me with that. just miss me with that. So I think that's all I want to talk about. I might go back and maybe post some of the snippets of the me watching it live, but it was long. It was getting long. I think I've basically gone through what I wanted to go through and talk about. But yeah, Charlie Kirk was not a Christian nationalist. I do also want to recommend to you guys, like on the website, I did write an article about why I believe that Charlie Kirk was a martyr. And I saw some people like on YouTube when I posted, like, he wasn't a martyr. I'm like, you didn't read my article. Like, go read the article. Go read what I said, and then we can talk. Steel man my argument. Like, I already wrote it out. I took time to write it out. If you want to know what I think, like, argue with what I actually think, but I'm not going to retype everything out that I just said and conveyed in my article to you in this comment section. Like, you guys can go read it, see if your mind has changed, and if it's not, give me a compelling argument. But what happened to Charlie's story? It makes me think of Stephen, because people were mad at Stephen because Stephen was saying all these facts and different things, and people couldn't take it, and they made up all this stuff about Stephen, and they found like false witnesses to talk about him and slander him, so they could go ahead and stone him, and they did. So I think it's important. I know it's been a month since he passed now, and I'm still talking about this. Like, there was I think it was a week that he died, maybe a few days. Someone's like, yeah, still talking about this. I'm like, I'm never going to stop talking about this. I'm going to talk about other things, but we still have like a murder trial, and so there's still a lot to go with all this stuff. But the reason why they are lying on him is because they want to justify why he died, and make it seem like they may say like, oh, this terrible has happened, but they're trying to make it seem like he kind of got what he deserved. And people shouldn't really mourn him to the degree that they're mourning him. And I don't like lies like that. I don't. It's why, like, I made so many videos about Cracker Barrel's logo not being about whipping slaves and all kinds of stuff. Like, people were saying the logo was about whipping slaves. It was, instead of like literally barrels full of crackers. When I was talking about the Meyer story, about how they fired that guy who was 19 and who was stealing food, and people were claiming that he was 16 and autistic, and that he was just taking food out the garbage, and then they fired him. And those things weren't true, and I was correcting it. People are like, why are you sticking up for this company that's all rich and stuff, and you got your, why are you under the boot of the rich man? And I'm like, I shop at this grocery store. It provides jobs to people. Why would I want your lies to win the day and force a boycott? It doesn't make any sense. So people are attacking me for that. People attack me all the time for telling the truth, and it just makes me kind of want to double down and just keep proving people wrong. I do wish I had a bigger platform. I know that other people have debunked and addressed different things. But I still get tagged in different things that I've already addressed all the time. And I'll continue to do it. I don't know, how frequently I'll continue to break down every single thing. But to be honest with you, a lot of people don't want to know the truth. And that's why we're in this phase of, oh, well, you'll just mention context. They don't want to know the context. A lot of these people, they just want to hate the idea of Charlie Kirk in their mind, because people don't like to be wrong and people don't like to repent. But the truth is the truth. I mean, you don't need to cast your pearls before swine, I guess. But there are people who sincerely are just making errors and will allow correction. So I guess I'll at least still do that for them. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. Someone said my Bible study has been on Acts since before what happened to Charlie Kirk. What a time to be reading Acts. Yeah. Please go to blackteeners.com, check out different content, website, articles, videos, etc. Articles like the Charlie Kirk one about him being a martyr. I am gonna do like a long one about Candace. I'm not gonna have time to post it before I go to church tonight, but I'll probably have it out in the morning. So you guys can check that out. Please check out my book Bigger. You guys can pre-order it. There's a link in the description that'll take you to my website where you guys can pick it up. It's a book about a baby dinosaur who wants to be bigger. You guys can also sign up for that painting class. There's a link that should be in the description as well. And so I will do a paint. I won't be teaching, but teaching it. My youngest sister will be teaching it. So we'll be painting, and some of you guys can get your own stuff, or she can mail it to you if that's what you want. They'll just up the ticket price a little bit, but just at least fill out the interest form. So I know people who want to do it online, so you can do it from wherever. Or if you want to do it in person, if you live, like I live in like Oakland County in Michigan. So I'm in the southeast of the state. Anyway, thank you guys. And I will see you on Monday. Be safe out there. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Go to church. God bless you guys. Have a good day.